Hey guys, what's up? So today I want to go over how 3 ways to be very consistent with your runway. So I get a lot of questions about how do I not foul on my jumps? Well, it comes down to your runway. So we're going to go over 3 ways to be consistent with your approaches. So for those that don't know me, my name's Fallon Headings. I'm a physical therapist and a track and field coach. So let's get started. So your first thing that you want to make sure, because 90% of fouls actually occur in your first 3 steps of your approach. So if you're making a mistake in your approach, it's usually in the first 3 steps. Now, yes, athletes stutter step at the board, but a lot of times why they stutter step is because a problem that happened before that. Remember in one of the videos that I said, a lot of times we see the problem later than when it actually happened. Again, this is a situation where we can't just make sure our athletes are on the board. Many times when my athletes are even on the board, I'm still moving them up because I see a problem that happened later or earlier in the approach. Same thing. A lot of times if they're stutter stepping to the board, again, I'm thinking it's a problem way in the back. So 9 times out of 10, I'm not making a whole lot of decisions based on just where their foot is on the board. I'm looking at their entire approach to make my decision of where to move them forward or backwards during a meet. So to get started, first place where you start is your start position. So where do you start? The most consistent way is your crouch start. So here's my little jumper right here. He is in his crouched position. Now, with all 3, these are probably the most 3 common ways of starting in your long and triple jump. With all 3 of these starts, you always have to get into this crouch position to start to power out. It's the same thing as when you start a practice run and you're not getting down in a 3-point or a 4-point start. You're getting into a crouch start to start your run. To start whatever you're doing at practice, you start in a crouch start. So that's the most common way to, I shouldn't say it's the most common. It's actually not the most common way to start, but it's the most consistent way because you're starting in the same position and you know every time that your hips and knees and your ankles are all the same. And this is where when you start to do a rock back start or a walk-in start that your angles can change. So, and that's where your inconsistencies will creep up. So a crouch start is definitely the most consistent, but I would say a rock back or a walk-in start is the most common. Now, why they're the most common is I believe because athletes see them being done by everyone. So they say, well, I want to do that. Do I have a problem with any of them? No. I think it's what's most comfortable for the athlete. But don't just because your favorite jumper, Christian Taylor, starts a certain way or the person that you're competing against at the track meet that always beats you starts with a walk-in start. Don't make your decision based on another person. Make your decision based on what's most comfortable for you. So a rock back start is when you're going to rock back, but then when you come down to power out, you still have to get into this crouch position to power out. So with the rock back, you're still standing where your tape mark is. So it's still going to be fairly consistent, but your angles could change possibly a little bit. But the more you practice, the more consistent it's going to be. Then your walk-in start, that's where we're getting a little bit hairy because when you walk in, you might not be exactly where you put your tape mark down for your approach. And then you also have to hit these same angles, but you're in a dynamic movement, so that might change a little bit as well. So that's where your inconsistencies can happen in your rock back and your walk-in start. But I would say they are the 2 most common, whatever's comfortable for you now. I was never comfortable with a walk-in start, so I always did the rock back start. Did I have a set number of rock backs I would do? Absolutely. Again, it's what's comfortable for you. I did 3 up on my toes, I did 3 rock backs, and then I went. That's how I did it. Everyone else is a little bit different. the main thing to make sure that you're doing is whatever you're doing, be consistent, be the same every single time, and don't do any wild or crazy things. Sometimes I see people like yelling and screaming and swinging their arms like they're about ready to fly on the back side of the runway. You don't need to do all that. Whatever's consistent, whatever's comfortable, start there, okay? Practice it. Practice it, practice it, practice it. That's the only way you are going to get consistent is practice. So next thing that you can do is adding a check mark. You can add an athlete check mark or a coach's check mark. I don't really do either of them, but I also do a lot of practice on consistency and on rhythm of the jump of the runway with my jumpers, so I don't necessarily feel I need check marks. But a lot of times if you are just new at the event and you're starting to still figure out your consistency and still figure out those first 3 steps that we talked about in your drive phase, a check mark at the end of that is good. So making sure that you're on, because if you're a little bit over that check mark, then you know you're going to have to maybe chop your steps a little towards the end so you're on the board. Or if you're behind, that means you're going to have to bring a little bit more speed to make up for it. And that's where, as an athlete, you can learn how to visually steer towards the board so you're getting the best approach that you can. So usually when coaches put a check mark down, it's actually 2 steps before the board. So they're really checking for the penultimate step there. I try and not put a lot of emphasis on the penultimate step because I find a lot of athletes slow down when they think too much about the penultimate step. So, but that's a different topic for a different day that I will go into. But check marks definitely are an option if you have a very inconsistent runner with their approach. If my athlete is totally inconsistent all year, and have I had those in the past? Yeah. And have I used the check mark? Yeah. But I don't use check marks for everyone. And then my last thing with consistency is just trust yourself. You have to, practice, like I said earlier, practice is what makes your runway the most consistent. It's what allows you to trust your runway. If you haven't put in those 1,000 hours, 10,000 hours, like they said, to become an expert in your area, guess what? You're gonna have inconsistencies, and you just have to understand that and be okay with inconsistencies. But remember, you're working towards a goal of being consistent. So I always say, whatever goal you're working towards, just make sure you're going in a forward progress. You don't have to jump over the bridge. You could walk over the bridge and just take some small steps. But you just need to make sure you're consistent in working towards that goal. As long as you're working towards that goal, you will trust yourself more, you'll trust your runway more, and you'll have a much better jump. So if you guys have any questions on consistency with your runway, let me know, put it in the comments section, subscribe to my videos, and have a great day.